So, how does a brain actually learn something new? How do we form habits, good or bad? Well, today we're going to dive into the science of how our behaviors get shaped. And get this, one of the biggest ideas in all of psychology, it all started with a dog drooling.
Yeah, you heard me right. The whole story begins not with some psychologist on a couch, but in the lab of a Russian scientist named Ivan Pavlov. And the funny thing is, he wasn't even trying to study the mind. He was studying stomachs. Look, Pavlov was a seriously big deal. He won Russia's first ever Nobel Prize for his work on digestion. But while he was studying his lab dogs, he noticed something. Something that at first just seemed like an annoyance. The dogs would start salivating, not just when they got food, but when they saw the lab assistant who brought the food. And Pavlov realized, wait a minute, this isn't just slobber, this is learning.
And really, that's what learning is all about, right? It's how we adapt to the world around us so we can survive. Pavlov's accidental find kicked off a whole movement called behaviorism. The core idea was super simple. Psychology should only study what you can see and measure. So forget all that messy internal stuff like thoughts and feelings. Let's just focus on observable behavior.
So how did Pavlov actually test this idea? Well, he designed these incredible experiments to figure out how our brains learn to connect the dots, to associate one thing with another. He was about to unlock a fundamental process that we now call conditioning. Okay, here's how it worked. At first, a bell is just a sound. It means nothing to a dog. But food, of course, that makes it drool. So Pavlov's genius was to pair them. He'd ring a bell right before he brought out the food. He did this over and over and over again. And pretty soon, the dog's brain made a new connection. That bell went from being just some random noise to a powerful signal that meant food is coming. It became a conditioned stimulus, and it could make the dog drool all by itself. Meanwhile, over in America, a psychologist named John B. Watson saw what Pavlov was doing and was totally inspired. He believed psychology should be all about observable behavior, and he made a claim that was, well, it was as bold as it was controversial. Think about how radical that is. Watson was basically saying that our environment, how we're conditioned, is everything. Forget about your natural talents, your personality, your genes. He was convinced he could take any baby and shape them into anything he wanted. And to try and prove it, he conducted one of the most infamous experiments in psychology's history. Now, you could never, ever do an experiment like this today. He took a little baby known as Little Albert and showed him a fluffy white rat. At first, Albert was fine with it. But then, every single time the rat appeared, Watson would sneak up behind him and slam a steel bar with a hammer, making this terrifyingly loud noise. You can guess what happened. Pretty soon, just the sight of the white rat was enough to make little Albert cry. It showed that fear could be learned and that it could even spread or generalize to other furry things like rabbits or even a fur coat. But Pavlov's drooling dogs, that's not the whole story. There's another huge piece of the puzzle. It's a different kind of learning, one that's all about connecting our own actions with what happens next. You know, the consequences. We call this operant conditioning. You see it all the time. A toddler says please and gets a cookie. That's operant conditioning. The most famous person associated with this idea was another American behaviorist, the brilliant but often really misunderstood B.F. Skinner. And before we go any further, we have to clear something up. There are all these crazy myths about Skinner. And the worst one is that he raised his daughter in some kind of experimental box and messed her up for life. That is completely false. What he actually invented was a safe, climate-controlled air crib for her. His real experiments on conditioning? Those involved rats and pigeons in what became known as a Skinner box. Okay, so let's dive into the tools Skinner gave us for shaping behavior. Because his experiments in that operant chamber, the Skinner box, they really gave us this powerful toolkit for understanding how consequences drive just about everything we do. The most important concept here is reinforcement. So in the Skinner box, a hungry rat is moving around, and it accidentally presses a little lever. Boom, a food pellet drops down. That food pellet is a reinforcer. What do you think the rat is going to do next? You got it. It makes it way more likely the rat is going to press that lever again. The behavior was strengthened. Okay, this is so important because it's probably one of the most misunderstood ideas in all of psychology. Ready? Negative reinforcement is not punishment. They are opposites. Punishment is anything that decreases a behavior, like getting a speeding ticket to make you stop speeding. But negative reinforcement increases a behavior by taking away something you don't like. The perfect example is the seatbelt alarm in your car. That annoying beeping only stops when you buckle up. It's reinforcing your seatbelt wearing behavior by removing the annoying noise. Now, in the real world, we don't get a reward every single time we do something, right? It's usually unpredictable or intermittent. You might get a reward after a set number of actions, like a coffee punch card, or it might be totally random, like playing a slot machine. And what's wild is that the most powerful, most addictive schedule of all is that slot machine, the variable ratio. Because you never ever know when the payoff is coming, you just keep pulling that lever. It makes a behavior incredibly hard to extinguish. So the ideas from Pavlov, Watson, and Skinner, they had this huge, massive impact. They made psychology more of a rigorous science. But their intense focus on only observable behavior, well, that didn't sit right with everyone. You know, the biggest pushback was basically this. Can you really understand people if you ignore everything that's going on inside our heads? Critics argued that our thoughts, our memories, our feelings, they aren't just random noise. They play a huge role in how we learn and who we are. But for a pure behaviorist, there just wasn't any room for the mind. So what's the big takeaway from all this? These two core ideas, classical and operant conditioning, they are constantly running in the background of our lives. They explain so much, from why a certain song can instantly make you feel happy or sad, to why you can't stop checking your phone. It just shows how incredibly powerful our experiences and our environment are in shaping who we become. And that leaves us with the huge debate that behaviorism kicked off, a question we're still wrestling with. Are we just the sum of our training, a collection of conditioned responses shaped by the world around us? Or is there something more going on inside the incredibly complex world of our own minds? How much of you is trained, and how much of you is just you?